Every Sunday afternoon, we have political affairs. Stay tuned. See you there. This is MWM. Emmanuel Bonbade. Somebody I have come to admire for a very long time. Mr. Bonbade, you are welcome onto the program once again.
Thank you so much. Let me say that there is an echoing on the sound, and that's why you are hearing the delay from me.
Okay. All right. Let's see where that is coming from. I'll speak to the technical team to work on that. But is it okay now, Mr. Bonbade?
A little better. It could be improved.
All right. I think I've gotten it now. It's done now. You are okay now, I guess. Yes. Okay, Mr. Bonbade. Security issues.
Yeah, much better.
Coup d'etat in Burkina Faso. Let's see. Bonbade, can you give a little history or background of what is happening in that country?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to reflect with you on an important, rather very important situation that affects our region and has a direct impact on our country, Ghana. So let me say that the current phase of the crisis we are seeing unfold is a consequence of the events of January 2022, when Colonel Henri Damiba took over the reins of government by overthrowing the government of President Kabore, who had won a second term after being elected in 2015. He did a first 5-year term, and he was in his second term. Now, you should be able to situate this in the bigger picture in order to look at it specifically to Burkina Faso. In the bigger picture, it is the consequence of the weakness of the state. Okay. And if you look in the Sahelian countries, criminal organizations who have instrumentalized Islam, and we refer to them generally as jihadis, have been able to clearly identify Burkina Faso in terms of a number of ungoverned spaces and the incapacity of the state to occupy those spaces and to fight off the threats of these terrorist attacks. And obviously, when you talk about terrorist attacks, you're also talking about the recruitment of young people into terrorism. You are talking about the capacity to infiltrate into towns and villages, insert themselves, be part of the community, and then plot how to be able to take advantage of the absence of the state to launch their, what I would call violent terrorist activities. Right. So the first point is to look at the weakness of the state. In other words, the sovereign territory of Burkina Faso cannot be completely defended by the Republic of Burkina Faso. And so immediately the question is, at what point do we acknowledge such a weakness in order to have much more proactive and meaningful responses? That for me is the first. But the second is the motivation to exploit the natural resources of these Sahelian countries, and specifically in Burkina Faso. You will see a coincidence of the activities that we are describing around the gold mining spaces that then become the activities also of terrorism. And you can see clearly that the purpose is exploit the resources and continue to finance their criminal activities and continue to pursue how, at the end of the day, they overrun the government. But when I talk about the government, I relate to the state. So they continue to make the state weaker in order to have more access to the resources of the state through these mines. But beyond that, the role of the state is to protect its citizens. And so when the state is weak and cannot protect its citizens, these groups not only weaken the state, but they also kill the citizens of the state. And that is why there is a huge number of Burkinabe who have been killed. And I would conclude on this first question that you asked by saying,
Yeah.
it was very obvious to many of us that the accusation that the democratically elected government of Kabore could not withstand or fight the jihadist groups was the reason for the coup d'etat of January 2022 in itself was fundamentally flawed, precisely because the issue was not about the government that was running the affairs of the state. The issue was more about the capacity of the state to protect its citizens and defend the territorial integrity of the country. So that after overthrowing the elected government, what has happened is that the military government of Damiba has done worse than the elected government in protecting the territory of Burkina Faso and protecting the citizens of Burkina Faso. And so in the conversation, the fundamental question or the key question we must ask is, are we more effective in fighting terrorism through democratically elected governments or through military regimes who find it convenient to put that argument in the forefront? And you can see obviously that I deliberately framed this question to say that you cannot talk about insecurity, you cannot talk about terrorism and delink it from the governance sector. It is the capacity of your governance sector that carries along the people that also has the legitimacy and the capacity to fight terrorism.
So, Mr. Bonbade, if I should hear you, it's more about this jihadists concentrating around where the resources are. I was listening to another network this morning, and it's believed that almost 37 region of Burkina Faso is being assaulted daily. Should Ghana be concerned about the political unrest in Burkina Faso?
Absolutely. Because our border to the north of Ghana is very close to the ecosystems that are life-sustaining, where there are also gold mines. So if you were in the Upper East region, my own beautiful Upper East region, and you were driving from the regional capital, Kolkatanga, towards Boku, my hometown, you will turn on your left when you pass the district of Zebila. And from then, if you were to drive probably for 45 minutes, you'll be across Burkina Faso in a small town called Yuga, where there are gold mines and where the fertility and the ecosystem of the area is life-sustaining. If I use that example, you can see it across the expanse of our northern border. And that corridor expands right from the Upper West region, where the closest town in Ghana to the Burkina Faso border is Hamili, right up to the east, where we are talking about Widana, we are talking about Pusiga. Now, if we are not able to secure those borders and make it impossible for these groups to penetrate, we will be at the receiving end of the exact violence that they are mitigating on the people of Burkina Faso and the undermining of the state of Burkina Faso. So first of all, it's our capacity to hold firm onto our borders and prevent any form of penetration. But secondly, if you look at the trajectory of the activities of these terrorist groups, if you were to go back and take it from 2015 to 2016, when they started to spread across the Sahel and also to form their various groups, they have never respected the border.
Right.
What they are motivated by is where are the resources abandoned and how can they have access to it? So you are talking about Burkina Faso, you are talking about Mali, you are talking about Niger, and to that extent, the 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 movement of these jihadist groups follow the corridors along the terrain to which they can access those resources, and they do not limit themselves at a border.
Right.
So that if the border is weak, they will continue southwards. So the point I'm making is from the Sahel region, they will descend into the savannah, they will descend into the forest region, and they will arrive at the coastal belt. As long as we are not able to stop them, they will continue a downward movement southwards to be able to continue. And so we are in the middle of a battle in which non-state actors that we are calling the jihadist groups,
Right.
who basically are criminal gangs supported by their international networks, are trying as much as possible to undermine the existence of the state, and they do not care about the human lives of the citizens of these states. Don't even begin to talk about human rights.
Right.
And if our states are not strong enough to fight back, then they will continue to undermine the state. And so I see it as a battle between the state and these non-state actors who basically are criminal organizations with their international financiers.
Mr. Bonbade, coming to you next, but I want to ask Mr. Bonbade another question, then I'll come to you. Can you hear me loud and clear, Mr. Mumuni?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, Mumuni, just hold on. I want to ask Mr. Bonbade another question, and then from then I'll come to you. And then, see, should Ghana begin to do any bilateral discussion engagement with our neighboring Burkina Faso, the new junta now? Because right now it looks like there is no stability in Burkina Faso, and there is a possibility that their grounds can be used as terrorists to affect our country. Should we, as a country, be talking with the junta right now in the Burkina Faso, sake of the peace of Ghana?
So let me. I need to take just one step back,
right,
and respond to your question.
Okay.
So in the conversation so far, keep in mind that institutions, as we have constantly argued, and if you look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, we're talking about Goal 16, where we talk about peace and security is built on strong institutions.
Right.
The Burkina Faso Armed Forces is disorganized, it has been politicized, it is indisciplined, and as a result of that, they have not been able to do exactly what was required of them in terms of their mandate to defend the territorial integrity of Burkina Faso. And that is why they overthrew the sovereign will of the people through one of the best elections that was ever organized in Burkina Faso, as an outcome also of one of the most progressive constitutions they have, with the justification that they are better in fighting the terrorists. But because of their division among themselves, because of a politicized military institution, we are seeing now at the end of September another coup. And in the past 2 days, within the same military setup, they have been fighting among themselves between the junior officers and the senior officers. Though a mediated outcome has just been able to come to a reasonable conclusion in which Colonel Daniba has been given an exit, and the story is that he's supposed to have arrived now in Lomé. So when I link that to your question,
right,
Ghana must never renege on the importance of continuing to build strong institutions. And since we are talking about security here, we're talking about the Ghana Armed Forces.
Right.
Because it's not enough to talk about our capacity to defend our borders. It's about that capacity understood in the mandate of the Ghana Armed Forces with the requisite professionalism, discipline, and integrity to be able to carry out their functions. Now, because of the integration of these institutions, Ghana is better placed since yesterday, as we have been observing
Right.
the unfolding drama, which I believe is happening. That number one, our internal security apparatus is sufficiently prepared to respond.
Right.
But in terms of engagement with the junta in place, though we know that Captain Traore is the one who has prevailed,
Right.
nothing has come out to indicate absolute clarity. And so Ghana is better placed to continue to be very active in ECOWAS. Keep in mind that we were the chair of ECOWAS,
Right.
and we recently handed over to Guinea-Bissau. And we need to be attentive to how ECOWAS collectively are monitoring and observing and making the type of collective decisions that safeguard